Chapter 577 First Fight, Extermination. He was one of the evil soul masters who went after the beast god with Douluo. That endeavor could be considered a huge failure, especially with the number of casualties they had sustained. However, he was the only one who managed to emerge unscathed. Similar to Tian, he also possessed dark-type power. When they were going after the beast god, he was able to develop a much deeper understanding of dark-type powers by sensing Tian's aura, as well as observing how he controlled his dark-type power. After returning from the hunt, he not only did not sustain any injuries, but also improved his soul power, and had become a transcendent Douluo. He managed to make a breakthrough past a bottleneck which had restricted his development for several years. Hence, Huo was actually facing an evil soul master who was a transcendent Douluo for his first battle. On top of that, the evil soul master specialized in dark-type power. The dark clouds that hung over the sky rolled towards Huo and instantly enveloped his entire body. After reaching the rank of title Douluo, the execution of soul skills was no longer the sole deciding factor in battles. Aura, soul skills, self-created soul skills, and identifying weaknesses were all important factors which could decide the outcome of a battle. Huo stood there without moving the whole time. He could definitely feel the immense pressure exerted on him by his opponent. In fact, this pressure felt strangely familiar. This was because the beast god was the last person to exert that much pressure on him, and helped unlock his potential. Even though this evil soul master was also skilled in dark-type power, he was a long way from matching Tian's powers. Dark-type powers? Huo revealed a faint smile as the visor of his icy war god's armor descended over his face. His entire body was now fully enveloped by his armor, following which, the icy war god's armor emanated a familiar dark blue light. The icy war god's armor was not just any armor, it was a human-shaped tool which was controlled not by Huo's body, but by his invincible spiritual power. While Sun Wen was making the icy war god's armor, he had considered Huo's impossibly strong aptitude in spiritual power, and hence adjusted the armor such that it demanded an unbelievably huge amount of spiritual power from its user. Hence, a normal human being would never be able to activate the icy war god's armor. Once he or she managed to activate it, the person would find his or her spiritual power emptied by the armor. The entire icy war god's armor was controlled by one's intent. Because of how the dark clouds had completely enveloped Huo, he was no longer able to see anything in the dark. Even his powerful spiritual detection seemed to have been trapped in a marshy swamp of darkness. Formless pressure was surging towards him from all directions. However, would this power be sufficient to restrict Huo? Spiritual blast. Huo enunciated those words slowly. Even though he did not shout them, the 2,000 powerful spectators around him could hear his words audibly, following which, everyone present felt as though their spiritual power had been influenced by Huo's attack. Even the dark clouds that had enshrouded Huo started to surge violently. An intense vibration started to travel through the dark-type clouds as Wu started to feel a mystical energy coming into contact with the soul power he had released into those clouds. Even though his soul power was not directly affected by this mystical energy, the spiritual power he had used to control his soul power was being disintegrated by the mysterious energy. The clouds which had broken free from his control started to rise back into the sky. This strange sight resembled the mushroom clouds which usually formed after huge explosions. A figure instantly flickered from within the mushroom cloud into the sky as the dark blue light on his body gave away his identity. Yes, he was none other than Huo. After ascending into the sky, Huo, who was wearing his icy war god's armor, seemed like a god who was about to descend to the land of mortals. His gaze was already locked onto Wu, who was now enveloped by the dark clouds. A transparent crystal at the forehead of the icy war god's armor suddenly cracked, following which, a streak of purple golden light was emitted as a mystical sight formed before everyone's eyes. Initially, the streak of light was purple gold when it was just emitted. However, it gradually turned rose gold in the air. Then, when it penetrated into the dark clouds, it mysteriously changed into a pure golden color. A streak of light was somehow able to change colors 3 times in the air. How mystical was that? A loud grunt could be heard as the dark clouds started to tremble violently, following which, a streak of dark blue light tore across the sky as it surged into them. The dark clouds seemed to be melting like snow the moment they came into contact with the dark blue light as they disintegrated into fine black smoke that scattered everywhere. Wu figure was revealed. He was currently rapidly retreating as he started to show signs of panic. A pair of black wings had formed behind his back. However, the wings were not part of a flying type soul tool. They were given to him by his martial soul. His martial soul was the darkness grow. It was dark-type martial soul, which was extremely rare. The wings behind Wu back seemed to be alive as the feathers on them emitted black lasers that intertwined to form a net in front of him. They were trying to block the streak of dark blue light that was going straight for him. Unparalleled chill, Emperor sword. The dark blue light just straight through the net. Even though the net did not break apart, its original black color turned dark blue. A figure silently appeared at the tip of the dark blue sword. Huo had disappeared from the sky and had seemed to use the sword light as a bridge to appear in front of Wu. Wu's movements seemed to be very messy. It was apparent that he had been affected by the blow landed on him by Huo's eye of destiny. However, he was still able to retaliate. The 2 yellow, 2 purple, and 5 black rings on his body gave him the confidence that he could still retaliate against Huo. His 6th ring, which was black, suddenly expanded as his entire body suddenly became illusory. His 6th soul skill, darkening. Even though his consciousness had been a bit blurred by Huo's spiritual shock, he was still able to activate his abilities. Darkening would allow him to negate 70% of all physical attacks and soul power attacks instantly. However, it would also mean that he would not be able to attack in that short period of time. Wu needed the 5 seconds of buffer time to shake off the effects of Huo's previous spiritual shock. However, Huo did not attack him at the first instant possible. Instead, he exclaimed a single word: explode. A light flickered within the eye of destiny on his forehead, following which, Wu's entire body started to tremble intensely. His body, which had just started to undergo darkening, was somehow returned to its original state under the effects of the mystical spiritual blast. On top of that, a black figure also exploded out from his body. This is... After seeing this, even Wu could not help but gasp in surprise. Is this spirit detachment? When did Huo launch another spiritual attack on Wu? Huo naturally did not launch a second spiritual attack. He had only released his spiritual shock once. Even though it was just a single attack, the power of a spiritual shock released with the eye of destiny must not be underestimated. Its power was fully released in a single instant only because Huo had feared that Wu had some alternative defensive means. He had only chosen to detonate the spiritual shock when Wu was injured. It was undoubtedly the best time to detonate spiritual shock right now. Wu was not a soul engineer, and hence did not possess any defensive soul tools which could block spiritual attacks. Even though he was already a transcendent Douluo, he was facing Huo, whose spiritual power was on par with an ultimate Douluo's. Wu's body flew backward in an uncontrollable fashion. At that instant, all the characteristics of his martial soul that his body had adopted all vanished. The black image which had been ejected from his body was trying its best to return. However, why would Huo give him a chance to do that? An image flickered as Huo vanished once again. When he reappeared, he was at a position between Wu and his spirit. Huo swung his left hand backward, while he threw his right hand forward. A mystical vortex suddenly appeared above Wu's spirit. The spirit, which was rapidly flying towards his body, suddenly stopped in midair. Boom. A soft sound could be heard as Wu's body flew backward once again. Huo's attack on Wu's body did not seem to be particularly strong. After all, Wu was already a transcendent Douluo. His body was definitely stronger than any normal rare metal. Wu's body flew back by about 50 meters. Even though his spirit had been detached from his body still possessed certain reflexes, which allowed him to slow himself down as he tried to regain his balance. Without looking him in the eye, Huo faced his spirit as a light flickered across his eyes. A streak of rose gold light suddenly shot out from Huo's eyes. It was another spiritual shock. Boom. The spirit instantly disintegrated into countless grains of light, which started to surge back towards Wu's body. This time, Huo did not try to stop them from reuniting. The spirit of a transcendent Douluo was already considered very stable. Even after striking it with 2 waves of spiritual shock, Wu's soul could still not be completely destroyed. Even so, his soul was definitely heavily damaged. After his spirit fused back into his body, blood started to spurt from Wu's mouth and nose. He immediately lifted his head, and the hood that had covered his head fell down. His fairly good-looking face was revealed to the spectators. Other than the fact that his face was a little pale, he looked no different from any normal human being. However, he suddenly raised his hand and pointed at Huo as though he wanted to say something. Nonetheless, he seemed to be unable to speak for some strange reason, following which, a mystical vortex suddenly appeared behind Wu. The vortex was a combination of blue and gold colors. The moment the vortex appeared, Wu's body immediately took on the same combination of colors as the vortex. Boom. Wu Yun's body was instantly shattered and powderized. His already shattered soul was destroyed in this huge explosion. There was nothing left of it at all. From the start till the end of the battle, the entire process only took a short while. Wu Yun, the transcendent Douluo who possessed the darkness martial soul, and the first evil soul master to represent the Sun Moon Empire, had fallen. A heavy silence fell upon everyone present as Hua Yua stood calmly where he was before turning around to face the Sun Moon Empire. Everyone had gone silent. Even Zhongli Wu, who had been brimming with confidence, became quiet. During the 2 hours before the battle, Zhongli Wu had made a series of plans, and Wu Yun was the first pawn he had decided to send out. Zhongli Wu was definitely able to guess what Zhu Zi had managed to guess. Hua Yua must have the necessary credentials to possess the courage to step forward and challenge 10 opponents. On top of that, Zhongli Wu must have tried to understand Hua Yua's abilities and fighting style. He knew Hua Yua was but a titled Douluo. Hence, his plan was carefully constructed with several considerations in mind. Zhongli Wu only had a single objective for sending Wu Yun out in the first battle. He wanted to use the strength and viscosity of Wu Yun's dark-type powers to burn away Hua Yua's soul power. This would create opportunities for the subsequent opponents Hua Yua would have to face. In fact, Zhongli Wu had instructed Wu Yun to surrender when necessary. After all, it was not easy to nurture an evil soul master to a titled Douluo. Furthermore, Wu Yun had just successfully become a transcendent Douluo. Once he was able to consolidate his abilities, he would definitely be a huge asset to the Holy Ghost Church. A transcendent Douluo had an enormous advantage over a titled Douluo when it came to survivability. Hence, Zhongli Wu had planned for the first battle to be a protracted one. Even if Hua Yua were able to use his ultimate eyes to suppress the dark clouds, he would have to exhaust a lot of his soul power and techniques in order to triumph over Wu Yun. However, little did he expect Wu Yun to perish in just a few short encounters. Even his soul had been destroyed. In fact, Wu Yun did not even have a chance to unleash his martial soul true body. He was simply killed while he was trying to probe Hua Yua to see what he had up his sleeves. Has Hua Yua really become so powerful? These thoughts flitted in the minds of the powerful soul masters and soul engineers from both sides who were spectating the battle. As they went through the entire battle in their heads again, they realized that Hua Yua did not make many moves. In fact, they did not even remember seeing him release the soul rings from his body. However, his extremely powerful spiritual shock left a deep impression on everyone. A transcendent Douluo was somehow unable to block his spiritual shocks and had died because of his spiritual attacks. How strong must Hua Yua be in order to have pulled this off? Those who were capable of keener observations would have noticed the huge explosion which happened in the end. It seemed to be some sort of ability Hua Yua possessed. It was important to note that an 8-ring soul Douluo might not even be able to kill a transcendent Douluo even if the transcendent Douluo were to just stand there and allow the soul Douluo to attack him for 24 hours straight. On top of that, Hua Yua did not even seem to be using any kind of soul skills. He was somehow able to kill Wu Yun with a gentle movement of his palms. Even if Wu Yun did not possess a spirit, and hence could not effectively control his body, it did not change the fact that his body was still impossibly strong, and his soul power was still present within his body. What kind of ability would allow Hua Yua to have to achieve that feat? His yin-yang complement soul cores. This was the answer which very few people actually knew. When Hua Yua had planted his palm on Wu Yun's body, he had transferred his yin-yang complement soul power into his body. The soul power he had transferred was an extremely unstable vortex. To put it simply, Hua Yua planted a mini soul core which drilled into Wu Yun's body, and this soul core was controlled by Hua Yua. The explosion of a soul core within Wu Yun's body was bound to kill him. Without his spirit to control his soul power to defend against the explosive force, he would never be able to survive no matter how strong his body was. It was important to note that Hua Yua's soul core not only contained ultimate ice, but also his spiritual power. Hence, Wu Yun's already shattered spirit could never have survived the explosion formed from the powerful yin-yang complement soul power. His spirit was simply destroyed. So powerful. Zhu Zi's heart started to beat faster as she started to grasp a better appreciation of Hua Yua's power. No wonder he was able to pursue my 2 beast ranked soul engineer legions with such ease. I can't believe how strong he's become. Yuao, you really are a generational talent. You are definitely the right heir to inherit Shrek Academy. Zhu Zi was amazed by the powers Hua Yua had exhibited. At the same time, she was becoming depressed. The more powerful Hua Yua became, the likelier he was to remain her enemy. Zhu Zi could still remember the words Hua Yua had said to her earlier. If he really wanted to continue harassing the Sun Moon Empire's army, she would have no choice but to ask the death god Douluo for help. And when that happened, it would definitely be a fight to the death. Can the second fighter please step forward? Just when everyone was staring at Hua Yua as though he was an actual war god, he suddenly spoke. Yes, now that the first one was dead, it was time for the Sun Moon Empire to send out their second representative. The battle had only just begun. Zhongli Wu was visibly angered by Hua Yua's words. After all, he had just lost an evil soul master who had just attained the transcendent Douluo rank. It had taken him many years to develop and nurture a transcendent Douluo, only for Hua Yua to take him down so easily. Wu Yun was an evil soul master who would rank in the top 10 soul masters within the Holy Ghost Church. Wu Yun's death was completely futile. He did not even manage to showcase his abilities, and was instantly killed by Hua Yua when he was still trying to probe him. This was a result of him not being sufficiently familiar with Hua Yua as well as the explosive power of Hua Yua's spiritual power. He did not even manage to drain much of Hua Yua's power. Zhongli Wu turned around to look at Zhu Zi before whispering, Marshal, Hua Yua seems to possess extremely powerful spiritual power. We must borrow the power of spiritual defensive soul tools in order to deal with him. Hence, I need our class 9 soul engineers to lend us a hand. Zhu Zi immediately frowned. Zhongli Wu was able to keep his wits about him and find out where the problem lay even in such stressful situations. No wonder he was the leader of the Holy Ghost Church. That was right. In the age of soul tools, it would be extremely difficult to beat Hua Yua without soul tools, especially when Hua Yua's spiritual shock was so powerful. However, once Zhongli Wu was able to equip his people with spiritual defensive soul tools, they should be able to withstand a few blows from spiritual shock. After all, Hua Yua's spiritual power was limited. He would not be able to replicate his spiritual shock 10 times. Zhu Zi was definitely unable to turn Zhongli Wu's request down when there were so many people, including evil soul masters from the Holy Ghost Church, around her. She immediately turned around to look at the soul engineers behind her before asking, is any of you willing to lend your spiritual defensive soul tool to the military supervisor? There were about 11 class 9 soul engineers behind Zhu Zi, and all of them were top class soul engineers within the Sun Moon Empire. More than half of the class 9 soul engineers in the entire Sun Moon Empire were present here. However, after hearing Zhu Zi's words, all of them kept silent. Zhongli Wu's eyes widened in rage. He was angry to find out that no one was willing to help him. Hua Yua was definitely not going to rush them. After all, the longer they took to send out the next person, the more soul power and spiritual power he could recover. Of course, Zhongli Wu knew this as well. Zhongli Wu gritted his teeth and exclaimed, I will buy them. There was no time for him to lose, considering how much he wanted the Jiangxi Ice Bear King, as well as how there was no room for failure after receiving the military order. He knew he had no choice but to buy the spiritual defensive soul tools. After running its operations for so many years, the Holy Ghost Church possessed wealth which could rival the other empires. The soul engineers present were visibly attracted by the proposition of a purchase. After a short discussion, they produced a price list before Zhongli Wu. All 11 class 9 soul engineers were like brothers from the same mother, as they produced the exact same price list as one another. A class 9 spiritual defensive soul tool was definitely priceless. The class 9 soul engineers would naturally only accept rare metals as the currency of the transaction. They requested 10 types of rare metals, and 1 ton of each type of rare metal in exchange for a single class 9 spiritual defensive soul tool. Zhongli Wu could feel his heart bleeding after seeing what the class 9 soul engineers had quoted. Even though the Holy Ghost Church was incredibly rich, rare metals were commodities which had great strategic value. The Duskwater Alliance, which Hua Yua had previously joined, specialized in trading rare metals. Even though the Holy Ghost Church had the quantity of the rare metals they had quoted, it was still a substantive cost. But could Zhongli Wu say no? The value of a titled Douluo evil soul master was definitely a lot more than whatever rare metals they were demanding. I will make sure all of you pay for this. Zhongli Wu gritted his teeth and agreed to the prices offered by the class 9 soul engineers. Even though he knew they were simply trying to raid him when he was out of options, he purchased a single spiritual defensive soul tool because he had no idea how long Hua Yua could last against the next person he was about to send forward. Zhongli Wu Wu was trying to buy as few spiritual defensive soul tools as possible. If he needed them again, he would buy them later. Even though the Class 9 soul engineers appeared to be very calm and collected, they were all laughing deep down. It was a pleasant feeling to see how an evil soul master was forced to accept an unfair agreement. After all, soul engineers, like soul masters, were normal people. They would naturally not have a good impression of evil soul masters. On top of that, the relationship between the Holy Ghost Church and the soul engineers was becoming increasingly strained over the past few years. Li Wu regretted not bringing some of the soul engineers from his Holy Ghost Church along for this war. He had left all of them behind in the Radiant City. If not, he would not have to agree to such an unfair deal. Following which, Li Wu passed the spiritual defensive soul tool he had just bought to the person beside him. Little Feng, take care. Please prioritize your safety. Okay. The person who was standing beside Li Wu was the woman he loved. She was none other than Feng Ling, the vice leader of the Holy Ghost Church. Li Wu was going to send Feng Ling as Huo Yuao's second opponent. Right from the beginning, Li Wu had never planned to use all 10 battles. He did not believe that Huo Yuao had the ability to last for 10 battles, even though he must have something up his sleeves. At the same time, he did not want to use all of his trump cards. There were more than 10 powerful soul masters from the Holy Ghost Church who had followed the army to war. Every one of them was at least a titled Douluo. Other than the two ultimate Douluo, they pretty much formed the backbone of the Holy Ghost Church. However, after their previous battle, as well as the fight against Tian, they had lost a couple of people. The battle against Tian had been exceptionally costly. Currently, they only had 9 people left, and 2 of those 9 people were heavily injured. Hence, they could at best send out 7 people. Among the 7 people, only 4 of them, including Li Wu himself, were at the level of a transcendent Douluo. It was extremely difficult to cultivate to become a transcendent Douluo as an evil soul master. It was even more difficult to nurture one. Usually, an evil soul master would have an enormous advantage over a normal soul master even if they were at the same rank. It was not impossible for one evil soul master to fight against multiple normal soul masters. However, when it came to higher ranked battles, the advantage would gradually diminish. For example, a 2-ringed evil soul master would definitely be able to slaughter a huge number of normal 2-ringed soul masters with his or her own evil soul skills. However, the gap would be a lot smaller when a 5-ringed evil soul master fought against a 5-ringed soul master. Eventually, after both types of soul masters had reached titled Douluo, evil soul masters would be more or less the same as normal soul masters, except for some advantages which were near negligible. Li Wu had ranked him alongside his other transcendent Douluo after Huo Yuao had demonstrated the courage to fight 10 different people. Even if Huo Yuao was super arrogant, he would never have proposed such a ludicrous challenge if he did not even possess the abilities of a transcendent Douluo. Hence, Li Wu only planned to send the transcendent Douluo under him to fight Huo Yuao. Sending any titled Douluo would just be a waste of his precious resources. After all, it was very difficult to train an evil soul master to become a titled Douluo. Those dead titled Douluo could have been war machines on the battlefield. Hence, the second person Huo Yuao was about to fight was Feng Ling. Feng Ling was the second strongest evil soul master among those who had followed Li Wu to the battlefield. She was right behind him in the pecking order. The fact that Li Wu had decided to send her as the second person meant that he did not want to lose any more of his powerful evil soul masters. Feng Ling floated to a position which was about 100 meters away from Huo Yuao before landing on the ground. She was also robed in black, even though she was not covering her head with a hood. She was undoubtedly beautiful, even though she was already a middle-aged woman. Her skin was still extremely fair, and she radiated a devilish, seductive aura. It was not the first time Huo Yuao had seen the vice leader of the Holy Ghost Church. Previously, when he first met Feng Ling, he could still remember clearly how pressuring it was to even be in her presence. This time when they finally met again, she had become his opponent. Feng Ling had a strange pair of eyes. Even though they were not particularly huge, they were alluring in a very different way. There were 2 dark red streaks which extended from the corners of her eyes to her temples. These streaks on her face gave her a very devilish look. Huo Yuao. Feng Ling spoke coldly. Huo Yuao revealed a faint smile and said, "Hello, vice leader. We meet again." Feng Ling replied coldly, "You are Tang Wu, the person who participated in the Radiant City Elite Soul Engineering Tournament, right?" Huo Yuao smiled and answered, "That's right. It seems like the vice leader is very observant. Very well." Feng Ling's voice was becoming colder as the black robe on her body started to flutter, even though there was no wind at all. Suddenly a piercing phoenix roar could be heard from her body as her soul rings started to rise around her. 3 purple, 5 black, and 1 red ring. Her soul ring combination far exceeded the optimal soul ring combination. Her soul rings were radiating a brilliant glow onto their surroundings. She did not have a single 100-year soul ring. Even her lousiest soul ring was a 1,000-year soul ring. Even Huo Yuao was a little startled after seeing her 9 soul rings appear before his eyes. He was amazed at the power she had demonstrated. No wonder she's the vice leader of the Holy Ghost Church. Huo Yuao did not know exactly what rank Feng Ling was at. However, he could roughly tell from her aura that she should be somewhere around rank 96. Because of the fact that she was an evil soul master, she could even be rank 97. This vice leader would definitely pose a bigger challenge than Wu Yan. On top of that, Feng Ling was now using a spiritual defensive soul tool. She would be a lot more resistant to Huo Yuao's spirit eyes soul skills. Huo Yuao's face revealed a faint glow as his icy war god's armor gave off a mystical glow under his control. Suddenly, the purple soul ring on Feng Ling's body started to emit a bright light. At the very next instant, a pair of dark purple wings extended behind her back. A powerful aura was instantly released as it swarmed and surged towards Huo Yuao. Phoenix wings. What kind of phoenix is this? Why are its wings purple? Huo Yuao had previously seen Feng Ling in action. However, back then, Feng Ling did not go all out. This time, the vice leader of the Holy Ghost Church was undoubtedly going to use all of her powers to take him down. There were no flames at all despite the immense pressure the wings were radiating. That is darkness phoenix. No, that would be wrong. It can't be the darkness phoenix. The darkness phoenix's aura should be pure, and would definitely not be so cold. This must be the evil phoenix. Yes, this was Feng Ling's martial soul, the evil phoenix. This matched exactly with her title, which was the evil phoenix Douluo. The evil phoenix Douluo, Feng Ling. Intense soul power fluctuations were radiating from the gigantic evil phoenix wings as the surrounding light started to become dimmer. It seemed as though the entire sky had turned grey. A powerful, suffocating sensation made Huo Yuao find it hard to breathe, even though he was within his icy war god's armor. Feng Ling is really powerful. Yan Shaosh, who was watching from the distance along with the other powerful individuals from the Shrek Academy, was startled as he muttered, "Evil phoenix. So she's actually the evil phoenix Douluo. I can't believe Feng Ling is the person who is holding that title. It seems like she has also joined the Holy Ghost Church." After hearing what he was muttering, 2 people looked over at him with unfriendly eyes. One of them was naturally Kaimaya, Yan Shaosh's wife, and the vice dean of the martial soul department. The other person was none other than Shen Liner, the Valkyrie Douluo. Yan Shaosh forced a cough as he quickly regained his composure. Of course he knew who Feng Ling was. To be even more precise, he had once shared an ill-fated relationship with her. Back then, when Yan Shaosh had just completed his training, he had been the most talented individual in the new batch of students from Shrek Academy. He was not only the disciple of the dragon god Douluo, but was also extremely powerful and handsome. Coupled with his powerful martial soul, the radiant phoenix, he was blessed with every single thing which could make him successful. However, Yan Shaosh tended to be a little flirtatious when it came to relationships. Otherwise, he would not have developed a poor relationship with the Valkyrie Douluo. His relationship with Feng Ling had happened before he had even gotten together with Shen Liner. Back then, when he had just completed his training, he had bumped into Feng Ling. Both of them had phoenixes as their martial souls. Back then, Feng Ling was a lot weaker, and the evil within her phoenix martial soul had yet to be awakened. Hence, it seemed a lot more like the darkness phoenix, especially when it was easy to mistake the evilness as dark type energy. Even though the radiant phoenix had just met the darkness phoenix, Yan Shaosh did not ostracize her. He felt that he did not have to do so because his very own teacher, Yuan, was also very good friends with Long Xiaya. In fact, the radiant holy dragon and darkness holy dragon even became a very inspirational tale for everyone in the Douluo continent. Hence, instead of finding Feng Ling repulsive, he was very interested in her. After all, he might just be able to start another inspirational tale with her. Yan Shaosh was young, handsome, powerful, and extremely charismatic. Before long, both of them got together and became a lot closer very quickly. However, their blissful days did not last very long. After being together for about 3 months or so, Feng Ling's evil aura was suddenly awakened one day. In fact, if Yan Xiaosh were to only find out about it later, he would have been killed and consumed by her. This was a special kind of connection the evil phoenix had with the radiant phoenix. To be more precise, Feng Ling's evil phoenix was only able to awaken so quickly after Yan Xiaosh had developed an intimate relationship with her. Hence, a huge battle broke out between Yan Xiaosh and Feng Ling. Yan Xiaosh was able to suppress Feng Ling with his superior powers. However, he could not bear to kill her. After all, he had already developed very powerful feelings for her. Feng Ling was the first woman in his life. In the end, he could not help but let Feng Ling flee. Afterward, he also left. From that day onwards, he had never seen Feng Ling again. Even though he managed to catch hold of news about her attaining the title of Douluo rank, he had no idea where she was. Mu En had, in fact, reprimanded him severely because of this incident. The evil phoenix was one of the most gifted martial souls among the possible martial souls which evil soul masters could possess. This meant that Yan Xiaosh had let a powerful monster loose. No one would know how many people would have to suffer under her wrath. Back then, Mu En had made the exact mistake, and naturally did not want to see his disciple repeat the same mistake. In fact, he was more worried that Yan Xiaosh would fall too deeply in love with her. Hence, Yan Xiaosh was grounded for 3 years as he studied and trained hard within Shrek Academy. It was the 3 years of closed-door cultivation which helped him develop the ability to eventually become the dean of the martial soul department. After so many years, Yan Xiaosh finally saw Feng Ling again. The thoughts and feelings which were racing through his body and mind could only be understood by him alone. On the other hand, Feng Ling seemed to have completely forgotten about him. She did not even try to steal a glance at him as she kept her gaze focused on Hua Yuao. The powerful evil phoenix aura exploded like a geyser as it radiated from her body. Hua Yuao and Feng Ling were now facing one another, but neither of them took the initiative to start the attack. Hua Yuao's aura was well concealed, whereas Feng Ling released her aura flamboyantly. Her aura caused the weather within a 1,000-meter radius to become extremely volatile. Even the powerful soul masters from both sides who were spectating had no choice but to release their soul power to defend themselves from her aura. Die. Feng Ling let out a cold grunt as her figure flickered. A series of strange-looking figures were left behind her as she sped forward. The shape of the figures resembled a purple phoenix. Feng Ling's right hand suddenly became incredibly huge as it transformed into a gigantic purple claw as she raced towards Hua Yuao. It was a simple, direct attack. She did not use her martial soul true body. It was almost as though she did not learn from Wu Yan's lesson. Hua Yuao neither retreated nor tried to evade her attack. Instead, he dug his toes into the ground before launching himself forward in a ferocious manner. Similarly, he raised his right hand and waved it furiously. A gigantic dark golden claw which spanned 100 meters immediately enveloped Feng Ling's body. Dark golden terror claw. After seeing the intense glow and the incredibly sharp aura of the dark golden terror claw which threatened to tear anything in its way apart, even Zhongli was startled. He had never imagined Hua Yuao to be so powerful. The dark golden terror claw Hua Yuao had released was already on par with that of a 100,000-year dark golden terror claw bear. Feng Ling released a cold grunt as the wings behind her folded together before she extended her right phoenix claw to grab Hua Yuao's dark golden terror claw. She was trying to use her small claw against Hua Yuao's humongous claw. Cling. A bright sound echoed in the air as a series of soul power explosions occurred at the point of contact. The loud explosive sounds traveled through the surrounding air and into the ears of the surrounding spectators. The series of explosions released countless sharp auras which cut deep into the earth around them, resulting in humongous trenches around them. The troops from the Sun Moon Empire and the people from Shrek Academy had no choice but to activate their strongest defensive measures to protect themselves from the invincibly sharp fluctuations which radiated from Hua Yuao and Feng Ling. Hua Yuao remained stationary in the air, while Feng Ling had been forced backward by close to 40 meters. Her black long robe had been torn to pieces by the sharp aura, revealing the light armor built from black scales she was wearing under it. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.